Welcome to Silent Reader Audiobook, a place for people who love learning, growing, and discovering powerful ideas through listening. Today's audiobook is based on one of the most intense and inspiring stories of mental toughness ever written, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. This is not just a story about success, it is a story about transformation. Before David Goggins became known as one of the toughest men alive, his life was filled with struggle. He grew up in poverty, faced abuse at home, struggled in school, and lived with constant self-doubt. At one point in his life, he was overweight, directionless, and convinced that he had already failed. But deep inside him, something refused to accept that reality. Instead of blaming his past or surrendering to his circumstances, David made a decision that would change everything. He chose to confront his weaknesses head-on. He chose discipline over comfort. And most importantly, he chose to fight the voice in his mind that told him to quit. Through relentless effort and extreme determination, he transformed himself into a Navy SEAL, an ultra-marathon runner, and a symbol of mental strength around the world. But the real lesson of this story is not about becoming the strongest or the fastest. It is about understanding the incredible power of the human mind. Most people live their entire lives using only a small fraction of their true potential. They stop when things become difficult. They listen to fear. They accept limits that were never real. David Goggins calls this the 40% rule, the idea that when your mind tells you that you are done, you are often only 40% finished. In this audiobook, you will discover the mindset that helped him break through pain, fear, and self-doubt. You will learn how discipline, accountability, and relentless effort can unlock strength you never knew you had. So take a deep breath, relax your mind, and prepare to hear a story that might challenge the way you think about limits, comfort, and personal growth. Because sometimes the greatest transformation begins the moment you realize something powerful. Your mind may try to stop you, but it does not control you.
The only thing standing between you and the life you want is the voice inside your own head, the quiet whisper that tells you to slow down, to quit, to choose comfort over growth, to accept average when greatness feels too painful. Most people think their limitations are real. They think their past defines them. They think trauma is a prison, weakness is permanent, and fear is a fact. But what if your mind has been lying to you? What if you have only scratched the surface of your true capacity? This is not a story about motivation. This is not a story about talent. This is a story about suffering, about confronting darkness, about choosing discipline when every cell in your body begs for relief. This is the story of a boy who grew up surrounded by violence, fear, and insecurity. A boy who believed he was stupid, small, and powerless, and who later transformed himself into one of the toughest endurance athletes alive. The journey of David Goggins is not comfortable to hear because it forces you to look at your own excuses. He was not born strong. He was not born confident. He was shaped by pain. As a child, home was not a place of safety but a battlefield. Abuse was normal. Fear was constant. Nights were unpredictable. When you grow up in chaos, your nervous system learns survival, not confidence. At school, he struggled academically, felt behind, felt different, and slowly accepted the label of not good enough. When authority figures do not expect greatness from you, it becomes easy to expect nothing from yourself. That belief is heavy. It follows you into adulthood. It whispers that you should stay small. After escaping his abusive environment, he carried the trauma inside. He gained weight. He avoided challenge. He drifted into a life of mediocrity, working jobs that required no growth, telling himself stories that protected his ego. Comfort became his shield. But comfort is a slow poison. One night, looking at himself in the mirror, overweight and disappointed, he felt something shift. Not inspiration, not positivity, anger. Pure, focused anger at the gap between who he was and who he could be. That mirror moment changed everything. Most people look away when confronted with truth. He didn't. He decided he would become a Navy SEAL, one of the most demanding military roles in existence. The decision was almost irrational. He was far from qualified, physically and academically. But sometimes, transformation begins with a decision that scares you. He had to lose massive weight in months. He had to pass intense physical tests. He had to overcome learning struggles. Every day was pain. Every run felt impossible. Every workout attacked his weaknesses. But for the first time, pain had purpose. He began to understand that the mind quits long before the body does. During brutal training, especially Hell Week, where sleep disappears and exhaustion becomes a constant companion, he saw men stronger than him ring the bell and quit. He felt the same desire to stop. His mind screamed that he was done, but he discovered what he later called the 40% rule. When you think you're finished, you are only at 40% of your true capacity. The brain is designed for survival, not excellence. It wants safety, not growth. When discomfort appears, it creates excuses, it negotiates, it rationalizes. If you obey that voice every time, you remain average. But if you challenge it, if you push a little further, something extraordinary happens. You expand your limits. Goggins did not silence fear, he overrode it. One more repetition, one more mile, one more minute in freezing water. The body adapts, the mind adapts. Suffering became his training ground. He began to understand that confidence is not built through affirmations, but through evidence. When you do hard things repeatedly, you collect proof that you are capable. That proof becomes unshakable. After completing SEAL training, most would relax. He intensified. He entered ultra-endurance races with minimal preparation, running 100 miles despite broken bones and severe pain. To outsiders, it looked insane. To him, it was mental callousing. Just as hands develop calluses through friction, the mind develops resilience through voluntary hardship. Every time you avoid discomfort, you remain soft. Every time you face it, you grow thicker skin. Modern society promotes comfort as a reward. Climate control, instant entertainment, easy food, constant distraction. But comfort weakens willpower. Goggins chose the opposite. He sought suffering strategically, not to punish himself, but to strengthen himself. He created the concept of the accountability mirror. Instead of blaming childhood, racism, teachers, or circumstances, he wrote his flaws on sticky notes and placed them on his mirror. Weak in math, overweight, insecure, afraid. Seeing the truth daily forced ownership. Radical accountability is rare because it removes excuses. It forces you to accept that while you may not control your past, you fully control your response. This mindset transformed him from a victim of trauma into an architect of discipline. The lessons from his journey are uncomfortable because they eliminate escape routes. If you are tired, you can push more. If you are scared, you can act anyway. If you fail, you can return stronger. The pain you avoid today becomes the regret you carry tomorrow. He teaches that motivation is unreliable. It fades. Discipline remains. Waiting to feel ready is a trap. Action creates readiness. Growth requires friction. If you never test your limits, you will never know your potential. Most people operate far below capacity because they negotiate with weakness. They say, "This is enough." He asks, "Is it really?" The mind is the battlefield. Win there and everything else follows. Lose there and no external success will save you. The powerful truth is that you do not need perfect conditions. You need commitment. You need to stop identifying with your past pain and start identifying with your future discipline. You need to replace comfort with controlled suffering. You need to stop asking life to be easier and start asking yourself to be stronger. The voice in your head will never disappear. It will always suggest quitting. The difference is whether you obey it. You are capable of far more than you have demonstrated, but potential without action is meaningless. If an abused, overweight, insecure young man could transform himself into someone of immense endurance through sheer discipline, then your excuses lose power. This is not about becoming extreme. It is about expanding your limits consistently. It is about confronting the mirror honestly. It is about building mental calluses through daily discomfort. You may not want to hear this, but you are responsible for your growth. Not your circumstances, not your critics, not your past. You. The question is simple and brutal. Will you continue negotiating with weakness, or will you confront it head on? Because the moment you decide that your mind no longer controls you, that is the moment you become dangerous in the best possible way. Your struggles can either define you or refine you. The choice is daily. The choice is painful. The choice is yours. And the next time your mind whispers, "I can't," remember this story. Remember the 40% rule. Remember the mirror, and ask yourself one more time, what if I am capable of much more? The journey does not end here. It begins the moment you stop running from discomfort and start chasing growth. Because when you truly understand this principle, when you apply it relentlessly, you realize something powerful and liberating. Life may try to break you. People may doubt you. Pain may test you. But if you control your mind, if you build it through suffering, through discipline, through relentless honesty, then one truth becomes unshakable. You become someone who cannot be easily defeated. You become someone who refuses to quit. You become someone who proves through action that limits were never real. And when that transformation happens, when your mindset hardens and your discipline sharpens, the world can challenge you, criticize you, even try to stop you. But deep inside, you know something powerful, something unstoppable, something that echoes every time difficulty appears. You are no longer the person who avoids pain. You are the person who grows from it. And at that moment, no obstacle, no fear, no past trauma can truly control your future. That is the ultimate lesson. That is the ultimate power. And that is why when you train your mind to endure, when you stop surrendering to weakness, when you build yourself through relentless effort, you reach a place where the world can push, life can hit, circumstances can test, but deep within, your foundation stands firm. And when that foundation is built on discipline instead of excuses, on accountability instead of blame, on suffering instead of comfort, there is only one final truth left to say. You have become stronger than your limitations. You have become stronger than your fears. You have become stronger than your past. And at that point, truly and completely, life may try, people may doubt, pain may arrive uninvited, but the core inside you remains unbreakable. And that is why you understand
the brutality of Navy SEAL training. Most men would have been satisfied. Most would have told themselves, "I made it. I proved I'm tough." But satisfaction is dangerous when you are building mental strength. Satisfaction creates comfort, and comfort slowly rebuilds weakness. David understood something most people never do. Achieving one impossible goal does not mean you have conquered your mind. It only means you have tested it once. And the mind, if left unchallenged, slowly returns to its old habits. After becoming a SEAL, he could have lived a respectable, disciplined life. Instead, he felt restless. There was still something unfinished inside him. The trauma of childhood had not disappeared. The insecurity had not magically dissolved. Success does not erase your past. It only reveals how much deeper you must go. He realized that physical toughness alone was not enough. He needed to push into territories where failure was almost guaranteed, where suffering would stretch beyond anything he had known. That is when he discovered the world of ultra-endurance racing. It began almost impulsively.
He learned about a 100-mile endurance race meant to raise money for fallen soldiers. There was only one problem. He had never run an ultra-marathon before. In fact, he had barely trained properly for long-distance running. Most rational people would prepare for months, maybe years. He had days. But something inside him refused to back down. He signed up anyway. This decision was not about winning. It was about confronting the voice that says, "You're not ready." Because the truth is, you will never feel fully ready. Readiness is built during the struggle, not before it. On the day of the race, his body was unprepared for what was coming. As the miles passed, the damage began. Stress fractures formed in his feet. His muscles tore under strain. His kidneys began shutting down from extreme dehydration. Every step sent waves of agony through his body. His mind screamed louder than ever before. "Stop! This is insane! You're going to destroy yourself." This was beyond Hell Week. This was voluntary suffering with no commanding officer forcing him to continue. The only thing keeping him moving was his own decision. At around 70 miles, most runners would collapse permanently. He did collapse, but only temporarily. He lay on the ground, body broken, barely able to stand. Medical staff advised him to quit. His body had reached what seemed like total shutdown. But here is the moment that defines transformation, when logic says stop, but purpose says continue. He remembered why he started. He remembered the soldiers he wanted to honor. He remembered the overweight man staring back at him years ago in the mirror. And slowly, painfully, he stood back up. Each step became torture. Blood filled his shoes. His internal organs were under severe stress. Yet he kept moving forward, not fast, not strong, but forward. That race took nearly 20 hours. By the end, he was barely conscious, but he had crossed a mental barrier few humans ever approach. That day, he proved something critical. The body will endure far more than the mind allows. Pain became his laboratory. He began to understand that suffering reveals the truth about who you are. When everything is comfortable, you can pretend to be disciplined. When everything is easy, you can pretend to be confident. But when you are exhausted, broken, humiliated, and exposed, that is when your character shows. Instead of fearing that exposure, he chased it. He entered more races. Badwater 135, one of the most grueling races on Earth, run in extreme desert heat, temperatures high enough to melt shoes, conditions harsh enough to break elite athletes. Again and again, his body failed. Again and again, he rebuilt it. Stress fractures, torn muscles, collapsed systems. Yet his mind grew stronger each time. He began redefining pain. Instead of labeling it as suffering, he labeled it as growth. Instead of seeing discomfort as danger, he saw it as opportunity. One of the most powerful concepts he developed during this period was the cookie jar. The cookie jar is a mental tool. Every time you survive something difficult, you store that memory like a cookie in a jar. On days when doubt attacks, you reach into that jar and remind yourself of what you've already overcome. Childhood abuse, weight loss transformation, Hell Week, a 100-mile race with broken bones. Each memory becomes fuel. Most people focus on their failures when challenged. He focused on past victories, not to inflate ego, but to strengthen resolve. When your mind says you can't, you answer with evidence. I already did something harder. But this journey was not glamorous. Social media did not celebrate him at first. Sponsors did not line up instantly. There were moments of isolation so deep that quitting would have been understandable. He trained alone often, long miles in silence, no applause, no crowd, just thoughts. And in that silence, the real battle happens, because when you are alone with your thoughts, you either confront them or escape them. He chose confrontation. He listened to his insecurities. He acknowledged his fear, and then he ran anyway. What makes this story uncomfortable is that it removes excuses. He had every reason to settle: traumatic childhood, learning disabilities, physical injuries, systemic challenges, but he refused to let those factors define his ceiling. He adopted radical responsibility. If something was weak, he strengthened it. If something was lacking, he trained it. He did not waste time arguing with reality. He attacked it. This mindset separates those who dream from those who transform. The world will always present obstacles. The question is whether you see them as proof of limitation or invitations to expand. During one race, hallucinations began from exhaustion. The human brain under extreme stress begins distorting reality. He saw things that were not there. He felt disconnected from his own body. At that level of suffering, most would stop immediately, but he had trained for this mentally. He understood that pain is temporary, but quitting leaves permanent doubt. So he stayed present, one step, one breath, 1 mile at a time. He simplified the impossible into manageable pieces. That is another hidden lesson. When facing overwhelming challenges, shrink the focus. Don't think about the remaining 50 miles. Think about the next step. Over time, he built a reputation not just as an athlete, but as a symbol of mental endurance. But even then, he remained dissatisfied in a productive way. Not negative, not self-hating, but aware that growth never ends. He continued setting new goals, new records, new physical trials. He broke the world record for most pull-ups in 24 hours after multiple failed attempts that left his hands torn and bleeding. Each failure could have been final. Instead, each failure became feedback. He studied what went wrong, adjusted, returned stronger. The deeper message of this phase of his life is this: once you conquer one level of weakness, another level appears. Growth is not a one-time event, it's a lifestyle. You do not reach a point where discipline is no longer required. You choose it daily. You confront your mind daily. You expand daily. The transformation from victim to warrior does not happen overnight. It is built through thousands of uncomfortable decisions. Most people wait for confidence before acting. He acted to build confidence. Most people seek comfort after success. He sought discomfort after success. That is the reversal that changes everything. If you only do what feels safe, your life remains small. If you deliberately step into fear, your life expands. And here's the hard truth that Part 2 forces you to confront. Your potential is hidden behind resistance, behind fatigue, behind self-doubt, behind fear of embarrassment. The barrier is not physical, it is psychological. If you can train your mind to continue when quitting feels justified, you unlock a level of strength that most people will never experience. The world respects results, but results are born in invisible suffering. Long before the race is won, there are lonely miles no one sees. As his endurance career expanded, so did his understanding of the human mind. He realized that most people negotiate with themselves too quickly. They feel slight discomfort and immediately seek relief. But growth demands negotiation with weakness. Just 10 more minutes, just 5 more repetitions, just 1 more mile. That internal negotiation, when repeated consistently, rewires identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who quits. You begin seeing yourself as someone who endures. And this is where the real shift happens. Identity is everything. If you identify as fragile, you protect comfort. If you identify as resilient, you chase challenge. He rebuilt his identity intentionally. No longer the abused child, no longer the overweight exterminator, no longer the insecure student, but a man who does hard things voluntarily. That identity shaped every action.
In the journey of transformation, there comes a phase where the external battles are no longer the hardest ones. The medals, the races, the records, they look impressive from the outside, but the real war begins in silence. After proving himself physically again and again, after running impossible distances and surviving brutal conditions, a deeper realization began to surface. Pain alone does not complete you. Achievement alone does not heal you. You can outrun competitors, but you cannot outrun your own mind. There were moments when the applause faded and loneliness grew louder, when the body was exhausted and injuries piled up, stress fractures, torn muscles, broken bones, hospital visits, recovery periods that forced stillness. And stillness is dangerous when your identity is built on motion, because when you stop moving, your thoughts get louder. Doubt reappears in new forms. Questions emerge. Who are you without the struggle? Who are you when you are forced to rest? The truth is brutal. Success does not remove insecurity, it exposes it. Every new level creates a new devil, and sometimes the devil is perfectionism, the obsession to prove again and again that you are not weak, the fear that if you slow down, the old version of you will return. That overweight, insecure, traumatized child still existed somewhere inside, and the only way to silence him was through relentless effort. But relentless effort has a cost. Relationships strain, the body breaks, the mind operates on extreme edges, and then comes failure, public failure, attempts that do not succeed, records that slip away, goals that collapse at the last minute. One of the most defining moments came during his early attempts to break the world record for pull-ups in 24 hours. The preparation was intense, the body trained to exhaustion, the hands conditioned, the mindset sharpened, and still the attempt failed. The pain in his arms became unbearable, his palms tore open, blood soaked through tape, muscles locked, the count stopped short of the record. Failure at that level hits differently. When you publicly commit to something extreme and fall short, the world watches, critics whisper, doubters feel validated. It would have been easy to step back and say, "I tried." Most people do. They attempt once, maybe twice, and then retreat into safety. But something had changed permanently in his psychology. Failure was no longer identity, it was information. Instead of protecting his ego, he studied the breakdown. Where did endurance collapse? Where did the pacing fail? Where did mental focus slip? He understood something powerful. Pain is predictable, weakness is measurable, and improvement is strategic. So he rebuilt. Stronger grip training, better pacing plan, more intelligent recovery. And when he returned for another attempt, he did not return emotionally. He returned clinically, focused, cold, precise. That is the difference between emotional effort and disciplined effort. Emotion burns fast, discipline burns steady. The mind, however, always negotiates. During those endless pull-ups, the internal voice resurfaced. This is enough. You've proven yourself already. Why continue? But he had trained himself to separate thought from command. Just because the mind suggests quitting does not mean you obey. Thoughts are weather. They pass. Identity is the sky. It remains. There is a moment in prolonged suffering where the body begins to shut down protective systems. Vision blurs, muscles tremble uncontrollably, hands lose sensation, the nervous system signals danger. That is where the 40% principle evolves into something deeper. It becomes less about pushing recklessly and more about understanding that perceived limits are conservative estimates. The brain is wired to protect you from harm, not guide you toward greatness. If you live entirely under its protection, you will never see your full capacity. Eventually, the record fell, not because pain disappeared, not because fear vanished, but because persistence outlasted weakness. Thousands of pull-ups later, hands destroyed, body trembling, the number crossed the world record threshold. But what mattered most was not the number. It was the reinforcement of identity. He was now someone who does not stop when things fall apart. He was someone who adapts and returns. There was another layer to this transformation that often goes unnoticed: vulnerability. For years, toughness meant suppressing emotion, suppressing fear, suppressing childhood trauma.
But suppression is not healing. True strength includes honesty, speaking openly about abuse, about insecurity, about fear of being exposed. That transparency did not weaken him, it expanded him. Because when you stop hiding your scars, they stop controlling you. Strength without reflection becomes ego. Reflection without action becomes regret. The balance is rare. At a deeper level, the entire journey reveals something uncomfortable for anyone listening. You cannot selectively apply discipline. You cannot choose comfort in some areas and expect greatness in others. The mind seeks consistency. If you quit small things, you train yourself to quit big things. If you follow through on small commitments, you build capacity for massive ones. The battlefield is daily. Waking up early when you don't feel like it, finishing tasks when motivation fades, training when energy is low. These moments seem insignificant, but stacked over months and years, they reshape identity. There were times when exhaustion blurred purpose, when running through the desert heat in races like Badwater 135 pushed the human system close to collapse, temperature soaring above survival comfort, skin burning, salt crystallizing on the face, shoes melting into asphalt, every mile testing willpower. At those points, the goal narrows into survival, not finishing position, not applause, just forward motion. One more step, then another. Pain becomes background noise. The body becomes mechanical. The mind becomes minimal. That simplicity holds a lesson. Complexity creates overwhelm. Overwhelm feeds quitting. Simplicity sustains endurance. Focus only on the next step, not the remaining distance, not the future outcome, just the present effort. What separates extraordinary performers from average ones is not genetics alone, it's tolerance for discomfort. Most people have talent. Few have sustained tolerance for boredom, pain, repetition, and slow progress. Greatness often looks repetitive and unglamorous. Long hours, early mornings, solitary training, no guarantee of reward, but consistency compounds invisibly. And here lies a truth many resist. You cannot heal by avoiding difficulty. Avoidance prolongs weakness. Confrontation accelerates growth. The abused child who once felt powerless transformed not by escaping pain, but by redefining it. Pain became teacher, failure became coach, doubt became opponent. There is still fear, there is still fatigue, there are still moments of questioning, but they no longer dictate action. That is mastery. Not elimination of weakness, but control over response. Imagine applying this beyond athletics, in business, in education, in relationships. Imagine responding to criticism not with defense, but with analysis. Imagine responding to exhaustion not with surrender, but with strategic rest and return. Imagine building a life where discipline shapes identity so strongly that external chaos loses influence. The journey continues, not upward in a straight line, but forward through resistance. Each new challenge reveals deeper reserves. Each failure exposes new adjustments. And every time you refuse to quit, you widen the gap between who you were and who you are becoming. Somewhere inside you, there's a version waiting, stronger, calmer, more disciplined. That version is not created through comfort. It is carved through friction, through setbacks, through moments when quitting feels logical, but continuing feels transformational. The world will always present excuses, time constraints, lack of resources, past trauma, external criticism. Some are real, many are valid, but none are final unless you accept them as permanent boundaries. Endurance is not about running forever. It's about deciding that your limits are expandable. It's about understanding that growth requires deliberate exposure to hardship. And once you internalize that principle, life shifts. Problems become training. Stress becomes rehearsal. Pain becomes preparation. The mind that once sought safety now seeks expansion. The voice that once dominated now negotiates from a weaker position. And you begin to realize something quietly powerful. You are not controlled by circumstances. You are shaped by choices within them.
There will be future failures, future injuries, future doubts. That's inevitable. But the response pattern is different now. Instead of retreating, you recalibrate. Instead of blaming, you adjust. Instead of collapsing, you stand back up. And in that repeated act of standing up, something extraordinary forms. Not arrogance, not invincibility, but resilience. The kind that doesn't announce itself loudly. The kind that simply continues. At some point, you look back and barely recognize the earlier version of yourself, the one who hesitated, who avoided discomfort, who feared embarrassment. That version is not erased.
In life when the
it is
greatest
integrated.
challenge is no longer proving something to the world, but proving something to yourself. After years of relentless physical trials, after endless miles of running through pain and exhaustion, after breaking records and rebuilding identity again and again, a deeper understanding begins to form. Strength is not simply about how much suffering you can endure in one moment. True strength is about how consistently you can show up when no one is watching, when there is no competition, no audience, no applause, because the real test of discipline happens in silence. For many people, motivation comes and goes like waves. One day they feel powerful, driven, unstoppable. The next day they feel tired, distracted, uncertain. Most people build their habits around these emotional waves. When they feel inspired, they work hard. When they feel low, they stop. But relying on motivation is one of the most dangerous traps in personal growth. Motivation is temporary. It is a spark, not a fuel source. Discipline, on the other hand, is quiet and consistent. It does not care how you feel. It does not wait for the perfect moment. It simply shows up again and again, every single day. Over time, this understanding changed the way effort was approached. Instead of chasing emotional highs, the focus shifted to building systems of discomfort. Waking up before sunrise, even when the body begged for sleep. Running long distances when the weather was brutal and the muscles were sore. Training through injuries, carefully but persistently, refusing to let setbacks become excuses. Every small act of discipline became a vote for a stronger identity. This process revealed an important truth about the human mind. The brain is designed to conserve energy. It constantly searches for shortcuts, for easier paths, for reasons to stop. When discomfort appears, the brain interprets it as danger and immediately suggests retreat. That internal voice is persuasive because it sounds logical. It says things like, "You've done enough today," or "You can start again tomorrow." These thoughts feel reasonable, but they slowly weaken commitment. Learning to challenge that voice became the real training. Instead of accepting the first suggestion from the mind, the response became negotiation. Just 5 more minutes, just 10 more repetitions, just 1 more mile. These small extensions may seem insignificant, but they accumulate into something powerful. Every time you continue beyond the moment you wanted to stop, you strengthen your psychological resilience. Another transformation during this period was the realization that fear never disappears. Many people believe that confident individuals simply feel less fear. In reality, the difference is not the absence of fear, but the relationship with it. Fear is information. It tells you that something matters, that something is uncertain, that you are stepping into the unknown. But fear should not become a command. When fear dictates your actions, your world shrinks. When you act despite fear, your world expands. There were moments when the physical toll of extreme endurance nearly broke the body completely. Running races across scorching deserts where temperatures climbed high enough to cause hallucinations. Competing in conditions where dehydration threatened organ failure. Finishing events where the body collapsed immediately afterward from exhaustion. These experiences were not about proving toughness to others. They were about exploring the boundaries of what the mind believes is possible. During those long hours of isolation, sometimes running through darkness with nothing but the sound of breathing and footsteps, the mind enters unusual states. Thoughts drift between memories, doubts, ambitions, regrets. The mind becomes both opponent and companion. It reminds you of every reason to stop. It questions the purpose of continuing. It exposes vulnerabilities that daily distractions normally hide. And yet, within that silence, clarity emerges. You begin to realize that most limitations are narratives you have accepted without questioning. Stories like, "I'm not disciplined," or "I'm not strong enough," or "this is just who I am." These stories feel permanent because they have been repeated for years, but when you repeatedly contradict them with action, they lose their authority. Each completed challenge rewrites identity. Each difficult morning run challenges the story of laziness. Each disciplined decision challenges the story of weakness. Slowly, the internal narrative shifts. You stop asking whether you are capable, and you start assuming that you can adapt to whatever appears. Another critical insight emerges from repeated hardship. Pain is not always negative. Society teaches people to avoid pain at all costs, to pursue comfort, convenience, and ease. But controlled exposure to difficulty builds resilience. Just like muscles grow stronger through resistance, the mind grows stronger through adversity. The key difference is intention. Uncontrolled suffering can break people, but chosen suffering can strengthen them. When you voluntarily step into challenges, when you willingly face discomfort, you transform pain into training. You become less sensitive to stress, less reactive to obstacles, more capable under pressure. This mindset has implications far beyond athletics. In everyday life, many people avoid situations that challenge their ego. They avoid difficult conversations. They avoid admitting mistakes. They avoid learning new skills because the early stages feel uncomfortable. But growth requires vulnerability. It requires the willingness to appear imperfect while learning. Another powerful concept developed during this phase is the idea of building mental calluses. Just like hands become tougher after repeated friction, the mind becomes tougher after repeated exposure to stress. The first time you confront a major challenge, it feels overwhelming. The second time, it still feels hard but slightly more familiar. By the 10th time, you recognize the pattern. You understand the rhythm of struggle and recovery. This familiarity with discomfort reduces fear. When you know that pain is temporary and survivable, it loses its ability to intimidate you. Instead of seeing challenges as threats, you begin to see them as opportunities to sharpen your mental edge. There were also lessons about humility. Extreme endurance can easily create arrogance if you are not careful. When you push your body to rare limits, it becomes tempting to believe you are superior to others. But humility keeps growth alive. The moment you believe you have mastered everything is the moment improvement stops. True mastery is recognizing that there is always another level of discipline to reach, another weakness to confront, another skill to refine. It is the willingness to remain a student even after years of experience. Injury periods reinforced this lesson deeply. Being forced to slow down, to recover, to rebuild from scratch, reminded that strength is fragile. The body can break, plans can collapse, but mindset remains the constant factor. During recovery, discipline takes a different form. Instead of pushing harder, discipline becomes patience, following rehabilitation routines carefully, allowing healing without rushing, maintaining focus despite temporary setbacks. This stage of the journey also highlighted the importance of purpose. Pain without purpose feels meaningless, but pain connected to a mission becomes tolerable. The mission was not simply athletic achievement. It was to demonstrate what disciplined human potential can look like, to show that someone from a traumatic past, someone who once believed they were weak, could reshape their life through relentless effort. Purpose transforms effort into something bigger than personal ambition. It becomes a message, a signal to others that transformation is possible regardless of background. At the core of all these experiences lies a simple but powerful principle. You become what you repeatedly do. If you repeatedly avoid discomfort, you become someone who fears challenge. If you repeatedly confront discomfort, you become someone who thrives in adversity. Identity is built through patterns, not intentions. Many people intend to be disciplined, but their daily actions reinforce the opposite. Changing identity requires changing behavior consistently until the new behavior feels natural. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds slowly through thousands of small decisions. The alarm clock rings early in the morning, and you choose to get up. A difficult task appears, and you choose to start instead of procrastinate. Fatigue arrives, and you choose to continue a little longer. Each decision is small on its own, but together they reshape the architecture of your character. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The actions that once felt impossible begin to feel normal. The person who once struggled to run a mile now runs dozens without hesitation. The person who once feared failure now seeks it as a learning opportunity. This evolution is not about becoming superhuman. It is about removing artificial barriers that the mind created. The human body and mind are capable of extraordinary adaptation when consistently challenged. The deeper message is that you don't have to replicate extreme athletic feats to apply these principles. The real lesson lies in confronting your personal edge. For some, that edge might be physical training. For others, it might be academic dedication, entrepreneurial risk, artistic discipline, or emotional honesty. Whatever the arena, the pattern remains the same. Face resistance, persist through discomfort, learn from failure, repeat consistently. The world often celebrates talent, but talent without discipline fades quickly. Discipline, on the other hand, multiplies
in
whatever
David's
ability.
life was not about becoming famous, admired, or respected. It was about reaching a point where excuses no longer had any power over him. For years, he had blamed circumstances, people, and his past. But as he pushed his mind and body further than he ever imagined possible, he realized a simple truth. The greatest enemy he had ever faced was not the world around him, it was the voice inside his own head. That voice exists in every human being. It whispers when things become difficult. It tells you to slow down, to stop, to settle for comfort. It convinces you that you have done enough, even when you know deep down that you are capable of more. Most people listen to that voice. They accept its authority without question. But David decided to challenge it. Every time he ran another mile when his legs were screaming, every time he woke up before sunrise when his body begged for rest, every time he chose discipline instead of comfort, he was proving something to himself. He was proving that the human mind is far stronger than it appears. Pain became his teacher, struggle became his training ground, and adversity became the tool that forged his identity. There is a powerful idea David calls the 40% rule. According to this principle, when most people feel exhausted and believe they have reached their limit, they have actually only used about 40% of their true potential. The remaining 60% lies hidden behind mental barriers created by fear, doubt, and comfort. When you push past that false limit, something extraordinary happens. Your mind begins to expand. Your definition of possible begins to change, and suddenly the things that once felt impossible start to feel achievable. David experienced this again and again during extreme endurance races. There were moments when his body was breaking down, when bones were injured and muscles were failing, yet his mind kept moving forward, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he understood something most people never realize. Growth lives on the other side of discomfort. In modern life, comfort surrounds us everywhere. Technology makes everything easier. Convenience removes obstacles. Entertainment distracts us from challenge. While these things may feel pleasant in the moment, they slowly weaken the mental muscles that human beings once depended on for survival. David chose a different path. He deliberately placed himself in difficult situations, long runs in brutal heat, workouts when his body was already exhausted, challenges that forced him to confront fear and uncertainty. To many people, this might seem extreme, but to David, it was freedom.
because every difficult experience was an opportunity to prove that his past did not control his future. One of the most powerful lessons from his journey is the importance of taking complete ownership of your life. Blaming circumstances may feel justified, but it also gives away your power. The moment you accept responsibility for everything you do, everything you think, and everything you choose, you take back control of your destiny. David calls this radical honesty with yourself. He once stood in front of a mirror and forced himself to face the truth about who he had become. He wrote down every weakness, every mistake, every fear that had been holding him back. Instead of hiding from those truths, he used them as motivation. That mirror became a tool of accountability. Most people avoid looking at themselves with that level of honesty. It is uncomfortable. It exposes flaws that we would rather ignore. But growth requires confrontation with reality. Without truth, there is no change. Another strategy David developed is something he calls the cookie jar. The cookie jar is a collection of victories from your past, moments when you succeeded, overcame fear, or endured hardship. When life becomes difficult and your mind begins to doubt itself, you reach into that jar and remind yourself of what you have already survived. Those memories become evidence of your strength. Each time David faced a new challenge, he remembered the obstacles he had already conquered, the difficult childhood, the intense military training, the brutal endurance races. Every past victory became fuel for the next battle. The mind is powerful, but it also forgets. It forgets how strong you are when life becomes uncomfortable. The cookie jar reminds you. Another lesson David shares is the importance of setting challenges that scare you. If your goals feel easy, they will not change you. Growth requires stepping into uncertainty. It requires attempting things that feel beyond your current abilities. Fear often appears as a warning signal in the mind, but sometimes fear is simply a doorway to growth. The things that scare you the most may be the very things capable of transforming your life. David's journey was never about competing with others. It was about competing with the weaker version of himself that once existed. Every mile he ran was a step away from the boy who believed he was powerless. Every challenge was proof that identity is not fixed. It can be rebuilt. That idea is perhaps the most powerful message of all. Your past does not define you. Your circumstances do not define you. Your failures do not define you. Your actions today define who you become tomorrow. Transformation doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens through daily decisions, waking up when it is easier to sleep, working when it is easier to quit, choosing discipline when comfort is available. These small choices accumulate over time, slowly reshaping your character. David's life demonstrates that the human mind is capable of extraordinary change. A person who once struggled with confidence, direction, and purpose became one of the most mentally resilient individuals in the world. Not because he was special, not because he had advantages, but because he refused to surrender to the voice that told him to stop. And that same choice exists in every life. At some point, each person encounters a moment when the path becomes difficult. The easy option appears attractive. The comfortable choice promises relief. But hidden within that moment is a decision. Do you listen to the voice of comfort, or do you challenge it? David chose to challenge it again and again until the limits he once believed in disappeared. The truth is that your mind will always attempt to protect you from discomfort. It will suggest that you slow down, that you accept average, that you settle for average. But the greatest achievements in human history have always come from individuals who refused to accept those limits. They pushed further. They endured longer. They believed in possibilities that others could not see. And through that persistence, they discovered a deeper version of themselves. The story you have just heard is not simply about extreme endurance or military training. It is about the transformation that occurs when a person decides to confront their weaknesses instead of hiding from them. It is about discovering strength in places where you once felt broken. It is about turning pain into power. And most importantly, it is about realizing that the greatest battle you will ever fight is not against the world around you. It is against the limits you place on yourself. Because the truth is simple. Your mind will always create limits, but those limits are not real. They are only the starting line of your true potential. And the moment you decide to push beyond them, you discover something extraordinary. You discover that the voice telling you to stop was never in control.